Welcome everyone. How's it going? How's it going? This is the Conscious Chicano. It's been a while since I've been on YouTube. I've been mostly on Instagram lately. Um, but welcome to the chat, the Conscious Chat number 42. The title is Mexican Independence and Hispanic Heritage. um, as you guys know, I am a Chicano, indigenous person. Let me see here, um, and I'll definitely have a critique on this, Mexican independence that just occurred, and this whole Hispanic Heritage Month. Um, I had to make some critiques about this. Anyways, so you guys know I have a different look now. I have my glasses here. Um, it's to block the blue light, because you got to protect your eyes, especially when you're around the computers or your cell phones or you have a spotlight on you. Anyways, wow, let's get to the topic. Mexican independence. So yesterday I was, watching on the Mexican Spanish channel, and I was like, okay, just taking a look at the whole celebration of Mexican independence and everything, and just observing what was, going on and everything. And there's some interesting things. They had some Mexicans, indigenous people, they're promoting resistance by preserving their native languages, and I totally agree with that. That's a good way to resist colonialism, westernization, and everything, because they want to. Western colonization has pretty much, reduced a lot of native languages, and it has pretty much institutionalized European languages. And I say my thing is on language preservation is like when you everyone has to go through institutions in order to survive, to make a living and everything, you know, and the only languages that they're teaching are usually European languages. Few exceptions, but most of the times it's English, Spanish, French, um, some of the major European languages out there. But it's rarely the case and almost non existent for the institutions to teach indigenous languages. And this is a form of colonization, and this is how you wipe out in other languages when you make European languages the dominant form of you know the language to use um, in order to work in order to trade, um, in order to function in society. So the institutions, in a sense, are maintaining colonialism when they don't teach native languages. So that was pretty interesting what I saw yesterday. But as you guys don't know too much, maybe you do. I was highly involved in the Mexica movement back in the day, back in the 90s and everything. And I definitely learned a lot about, indigenous Mexican history, Chicano history, decolonization, and all this different things like that. So what I've learned there was very interesting. And, basically Mexican independence was not truly independence for indigenous people, right? For brown people in general in Mexico, right? Um, as you guys know, I don't accept the term mestizo, because even that's a form of it's a colonial identity, imposed by the Spaniards, right? But Mexican independence was not truly independence for brown folks in Mexico, you know. So what happened is, if you guys don't know what colonization is, the Spaniards, you know, took over, you know, indigenous lands out here, especially what they call Mexico, and they ruled. You know, the Spain ruled for a while. You know, and what happened is that um, the Spaniards that moved to um, where what the land that they call Mexico, um, known as criollos, Spaniards born in Mexico, right? Um, they basically they wanted all the land and resources, so they wanted independence from the Spaniards from Spain, and so they wanted, in a sense, to hoard all the resources, land, and wealth, and they basically used the indigenous people, the brown folks, whether you're mixed or full blood, they used them to basically fight off Spain and to disconnect from Spain. Um, but then the remaining Spaniards in Mexico, uh, established their caste system where they were at the top, owning all the resources, controlling the masses, enslaving them, um, basically having full control of all the land and resources. So the question is, did is Mexican independence truly independence for brown folks in Mexico, or was it independence for the criollos in Mexico, the Spaniards in Mexico, right? So, um, so the way I see it, as a brown Chicano who identifies with his indigenous identity and history and culture, I see it as that the Spaniards or criollos, um, they're the ones that gain independence, and not the bulk of the brown population in Mexico. Um, so the Spaniards, they took all lots of the land, indigenous lands, and then there was an uprising in Chiapas, and the indigenous people wanted to have full control over their land. This was especially when the Spaniards established officially established the Mexican government, and so what happened is that the indigenous people wanted full control of their resources and land, but then there was like basically it was like it was a fight. Basically, they had to resist. They had to fight for their rights and everything, and one of the reasons why the Mexican Revolution even occurred was because it was over the indigenous land rights and resources. The Mexican government wanted to take all the indigenous land and resources because it was controlled by the criollos, the Spaniards in Mexico. And so, and to this very day, you have, the Mexican government pretty much, in control of the resources and land in Mexico. Um, but indigenous resistance still occurs and everything. So Mexican independence was independence for the Spaniards in Mexico, but it was not independence for indigenous people, brown folks. The bulk, whether you were full blood or mixed blood, you were basically a peon. You were a slave to the Spaniards, right? You were at the bottom, right? You were pretty much the working class. Well, they sat on top of you, and they had control of the resources and land, and the Spaniards on top of the caste system they established. So as a Chicano, as a indigenous person, you have to be critical of Mexican independence. Because it was not independence for us brown folks. It was independence for the Spaniards living in Mexico, and it was just basically competition between the Spaniards in Spain and the Spaniards in Mexico. And so whenever you have these celebrations, and I'm very critical of a lot of European holidays, and a lot of times they're just celebrating colonization, and even something like Mexican independence is even not fully representing indigenous people, brown folks. Although brown folks did break, they helped um, establish independence from Spain through their, because they comprise most of the military, the Mexican military, and but when they after they fought and shed their blood for independence from Spain, they came, they came basically back, and from fighting a war, and they came back and they didn't have full control of the resources and land, and so that's a problem with colonization. Also, I wanted to get on the topic of Hispanic heritage. As a Chicano, a decolonization Chicano, indigenous Chicano, I have a problem with the whole term Hispanic. Hispanic is a people from Hispania, right? And if you're Chicano, if you're Mexican, you're native, you're not from Hispania, right? So Hispania, Hispanic, all that has nothing to do with us, right? And even we were forced to speak Spanish, right? A lot of our people were forced to speak Spanish. That does not make you a Spaniard, right? That does not make you a Hispanic, right? So I'm very critical of even the identities, false identities of Hispanic, Latino, even mestizo and all that. That's just imposed upon brown folks by the oppressors, the Spaniards, the colonizers. So I am definitely critical of the so-called Hispanic heritage. Um, and it's funny is that you still hear white folks calling us Hispanic, right? Or Latinos, right? We call ourselves sometimes Latinos and Hispanics. Still a lot of colonization, and we don't have our true awareness of where we come from and who we truly are. And a lot of times there's confusion because the oppressors, the Spaniards, have confused us all and promoted a false identities upon us and made us think that just because a long time ago some Spaniard raped an indigenous woman or so-called married an indigenous woman, that we can't deny our Spanish blood, right? And I don't follow that logic. Actually, the logic I follow is that very similar to the way African Americans and other people, even Native Americans out here, um, even though they may be historically, they were historically raped, and the European blood is now in them. African Americans identify with the African. They don't identify with the slave master, right? I mean, was it even what's it called? Native Americans. A lot of them are half Anglo, right? And a lot of times could be historically due to rape or false marriages or forced marriages. Um, but a lot of times they still identify as indigenous. But the problem with Mexicans, we've been so brainwashed by the Spaniards, by mestizaje, that we no longer want to identify as indigenous, and we rather identify with the Spaniard, and so, and you see it in our people how the women are dyeing their hair blonde and putting blue contact lenses, and they don't want to be out in the sun because they don't want to be dark. Trying their best to you know assimilate to the European domination. You see it in Mexico, you see it in the United States as well too. It's a lot of loss. They have no sense of self, and they're lost in terms of their identity, their history, their culture, confused confused by the colonizer. Anyways, but yeah, I just had to give a little critique of that, um, of the Mexican independence and Hispanic heritage. You know, and yeah, that's if welcome everyone. I see some people on my Instagram. Um, they join my Instagram. Also, if you want to join me on chat right here on YouTube on my video, I sent the link there. You can click on the link if you want to come on YouTube and talk about this topic. Um, but definitely, the whole Mexican independence, I see a lot of this, occurring, and nobody's really talking about the real history, um, the real context of what happened with Mexicans and what is still happening to this very day. You know, I remember a couple years ago I went to Mexico City, and I was just looking around and going to different cities, different places around Mexico City, and I noticed that there was a difference between your regular Mexican like communities, and then you go to the areas where all the wealthy people were, and there's even a mall um, where some of the wealthy neighborhoods were. So I went to this mall, and I'm over there looking around, and I was like, okay, who are the people that actually live in this rich area? And most of the time, I didn't see hardly any brown folks. I saw like Europeans, or you know, it definitely didn't look like brown folks. And I was like, oh, okay, I see what's going on. It's just like the United States. You go to the rich areas in the United States, and you observe that most of these people who are in these wealthy neighborhoods are usually of European descent. So that caste system in Mexico still exists to this very day. And then when you go to the regular communities out there, even the poor communities, you see a lot of brown folks there. So there's a divide there. Colonization still exists. There's still a caste system, the have versus the have-nots. Um, so you definitely have that. So Mexican independence was not independence for indigenous people, for brown folks, and it was independence for the Spaniards living in Mexico, the criollos as they call them. It was independence from basically two colonizers. I mean, it was competition between two colonizers, the Spaniards of Spain versus the Spaniards of Mexico, and it was basically a fight over wealth and resources. And I remember there was times in history where you even have European pirates. Sometimes there'll be European pirates taking a lot of the gold to their European nations from the Americas, and sometimes other European pirates, from other nations would actually um, basically hijack, the some Europeans, and they would fight over the gold. They would hijack a ship and steal their gold. So it's almost something like that. It's like, you got one thief versus another thief, and they're basically stealing the wealth and resources. And the same thing is between the Spaniards of Spain versus the Spaniards in Mexico. It's like it was it was a fight over land and resources. The Spaniards from Spain wanted full control of Mexico, whereas the Spaniards in Mexico wanted full control. You know, so um, definitely, and so people try to say that Mexican independence was a liberation for brown folks, indigenous people. It wasn't truly a liberation because later on, you had um, indigenous uprisings, you know, who were fighting against the Mexican government for, for their land and resources. So the criollos, the Spaniards in Mexico, they were hoarding all the wealth with their caste system. They set up a caste system there, and it still exists to this very day. Anyways, so let's see here. I do have also some comments here, and let me see if how's it going? Casual conversation with GNA. Let's see here. Casual conversation. You're if you want, you can be the moderator. I'm not too sure if you have access to that still. Be the moderator of my chats. Welcome. It's been a long time. I'll be on here more frequently talking about different topics, but Hispanic heritage too. We're not Hispanics. We're not from Hispania, and we're brown indigenous folks, Anyways, well, let me see if it's worth commenting on somebody's comment. So I see someone making a comment here, and let's see. I'm gonna read it here. Let's see here. Give me a little moment here. Okay, yeah, I think I'll comment on here. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to write it on my discussion here. I'll just go ahead and answer this. This is actually a good comment here. So I don't know who this guy is. He doesn't put his real name down. So, but usually I prefer that them to have their, at least a picture or their name down here. But anyways, he's saying that that's false. The masses that combated the royalist army were native and mestizos. However, they did not participate in the creation of the new country. Okay, man. Um, First of all, I just mentioned earlier, if you were here at the beginning, I do not agree with the whole mestizo identity. Just read a book called was it Chicanos de Aslan, um, by Jack D. Forbes, and he has a whole chapter dissecting the whole mestizo label and identity as a colonial identity that erases indigenous identity, and it was promoted and established by the Spaniards. So I do not identify as mestizo. Um, but I think what you're probably saying is native and someone that's not full blood. That was, the Spanish blood was imposed upon us through a lot of times was rape or forced marriages. So I think that's what you mean by that. But You say the masses that combated the royalist army were native. Yeah. No, I did. If you were here earlier, you would have heard what I just said. You didn't, you weren't here earlier, so you're kind of like saying, you're saying something that's not accurate. So I did say that the indigenous and the mixed blood people were in the military. But I have to disagree with your statement after that. You said they did not participate in the creation of the new country. Um, that's I will agree to some extent, but not totally agree with that statement as well, because um, the indigenous and mixed bloods did participate in the creation of the country in terms of labor, in terms of being the workforce in building the whole country up. But you are correct on that, on the Spaniards, how they basically were promoting a lot of their Eurocentrist nationalism, their nation building and everything like that. So you're somewhat accurate, but then I don't agree with um, your statement that they did not participate in the creation of the new country. Um, so actually, that was all right. That was all right comment. So I don't see it as um, offensive or disrespectful. So that's why I went ahead and addressed that whole comment. So um, let's see here. Oh yeah, yeah, that's it right there, man. My bad. I said Chicanos de Aztlan. My bad. It's Aztecas del Norte. Excuse me for not remembering accurately. So no, you're right, man. Okay, so it seems like you know your stuff, man. Let's see here. Read. Oh, okay. Now you're trying to say reread the book Aztecas del Norte. I read it a bunch of times. And Jack D. Forbes, he he critiques the mestizo label. I even have a friend of mine, Victor Mejia, who wrote a whole essay on that too. Go look him up on Google. He critiques the whole mestizo identity and how it's a psychosis. It's a confused psychosis, a double-mindedness where you're no you I your mindset is like you're neither indigenous, neither, and then you're like you're so confused that, oh, okay, do I identify as indigenous or do I identify as a Spaniard? Do I identify as a slave master or someone that's been enslaved? And it's like it's a confusion. So Victor Mejia addresses that whole psychosis there. He basically promotes that we should identify as indigenous. And there's also another book called Mexico Profundo, and he addresses that whole mindset as well. That the anthropologist Bonfil Batalla says that we should identify with our motherland, which is indigenous. Mexican Mexican culture has been built on indigenous culture, and that's what we should identify with. It's the new layer of the Spaniard coach illusionary parasitic culture that has imposed itself like kind of like a capitalist parasite, and it just thrives and feeds off the indigenous culture. So so what he's arguing is that we should identify as indigenous people and not identify with this capitalist parasitic Spaniard culture that has basically lived off has thrived off indigenous culture and has even manipulated and controlled it and even harmed it to this very day. So we have to be aware of that there. Anyways, let's see here. So you mentioned something else. Let me just take this off here. Um, let's see. So I took that comment off there. Okay, let me see. Let me address this here. So you mentioned here the fact of the matter is that indigenous and mixed indigenous peoples have always been the majority but prefer domination by the minority. Liberals will call them victims, me, fools. Okay, so here's another. See, I'll dissect your statements here, and no, you're right there is that the fact of the matter is that indigenous and mixed indigenous people have always been the majority, but you're saying that they prefer domination by the minority. And I'm thinking you're thinking about the criollos, the Spaniards in Mexico, right? Who are the minority population in Mexico. Um, I don't think that's true, actually. Indigenous people, brown, even mixed blood, brown people have, throughout Mexican history, have fought against the colonizers, Spanish oppression, and everything. So I don't think that they prefer domination. Now, I will admit that there is like a slave mindset amongst Mexicans and Chicanos where um, we do prefer the colonizer to be in control. It's a slave mindset, right? But then, like I said, I promote this consciousness that hey, it's time to get out of that slave mindset, and it's like okay, a conscious brown person will, not prefer Europeans to be in dominance and in control, of the resources and and so yeah, it all depends on the mindset there. So people who are colonized do prefer the Europeans to be in control of the resources and land. But then people who are conscious, especially brown conscious folks, don't prefer that. They rather have their people who are the majority, who rightfully should own the land and resources and have control of their own institutions. Um, brown folks should be in control of all that instead of Europeans. So it depends on the state of mind of what what the psychology is of the person you're referring to. It's either a slave mindset or a conscious mindset. Um, I'm not too sure what you mean by there. Liberals will call them victims, me fools. Okay. Um, I'm actually not in favor of a lot of the liberal rhetoric, but then also the Republican, Democrats, all that right there. It's all manipulated. There's issues that I agree with Republicans and Democrats, and there's also issues I disagree with Republicans and Democrats. A lot of the time, it's usually Eurocentric perspectives on different topics. So it all depends on the topic and everything. Um, but usually, a brown consciousness, it usually doesn't agree with the Eurocentric perspectives. So it all depends. Um, but yeah, there's times where you know, I guess you're addressing the whole victimhood stuff, where we have a lot of liberals that they identify as victims, and they stay a victim the rest of their life. I don't actually promote that. I actually promote that brown folks, get out of that victim mindset. When you learn your history and culture, you do learn that your people have been victimized by the colonizers, right? But there's a time where you get out, you get out of the victim mindset and you do something about it. And the way to do something about it is to change your situation, is to resist, right? Through words, through behavior, through action. And it's resisting colonialism, white supremacy, systemic white supremacy, and by doing that is reasserting your indigenous history, identity, culture, and also fighting against poverty too, because poverty is a major colonial condition that a lot of us suffer from, and resisting poverty too is like you know, and learning, learning how to even like to succeed in life, not being a victim, right? Not being, oh, woe is me, and oh, I'm a victim, and this and that, and then you stay stuck in poverty, and you don't end up to doing anything. You don't amount to anything. And we have a lot of Chicanos out here who have that victim mindset where they end up going into delinquency, gangs, and drugs, and all kinds of dysfunctional conditions and everything. That's the victim right there, the victim mindset. So we got to rise above that, and start working on self construction, as well as you know bettering ourselves and bettering our communities as well. So it's not just selfish individualism, but there's also a form of communalism as well. And so, um, so you work on yourself, you succeed, and have these resources, and be able to help your other brown folks out here. But some people say it's the system, right? Some people say, well, it's it's like, oh, it's not about you succeeding only, right? But what about the rest of us, right? So that's an issue as well. The system is broken, and it does breed, you know, the have versus the have-nots. We have a problem with this capitalist system out here, and the way I am is, I'm not totally anti-capitalist, but if you actually read the philosophy of Adam Smith, um, people, like a lot of capitalists, will just read his view of just the description of capitalism and how it should function. But he also, in another book, he talked about the morality of capitalism, how he was aware of the dangers of the rich hoarding all the wealth and controlling, everything, and so he does believe that we should have some kind of morality guiding us in terms of economics. So I'm not like these communists out here, or I used to be a Marxist and socialist, but no longer buy into that because it's no longer realistic. And I saw a lot of the failures of socialism out here in the United States. But um, but I do believe that capitalism should have some kind of morality in its guidance. I am aware of capitalism as having like really bad historical roots in slavery, genocide, land theft, and from capitalism, um, once the Europeans established themselves, they set up a caste system, where they were at the top and everybody else was the workers building their empire, right? And to this very day, this the Europeans have had this advantage over the colonized people, usually the brown and native indigenous people. Um, but at the same time, we can't eradicate capitalism. It's a reality out here. I remember being a communist, a socialist, and away with the system, right? But that's not the reality, man. It's capitalism. It seems like it's gonna be here, and we have to deal with it. And so, what I do is promote more of a moralistic capitalism, and I definitely am critical of, you know, the ruling rich elites and how they control, manipulate society, and how a lot of working class people, the poor, were left out, and it's like, okay, it's like it's basically even like in Marxist philosophy, you know, the was it the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, right? And actually, Marx was pretty good on dissecting capitalism. I just didn't agree with his communist utopia, right? How it would solve everything, and it doesn't address even the indigenous complexities of colonization. But he was right on the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, and how the bourgeoisie, they own the was it the means of production, and the workers don't, and so the workers are kind of left out of actually having access to the capital and resources that they work so hard for. They'll probably just get a little tiny bit, whereas the CEOs will reap most of the benefits of the hard work and toil of the working class. So there is a problem with capitalism out here, and we have, a lot of, rich capitalists owning most of the lands out here. I just came out of a meeting the other day, and is you got these rich companies like Vanguard and BlackRock buying up all the land. Now the common folks out here can't even afford houses out here, and because the prices have been rising dramatically. So we have these haves versus have-nots out here. But like I said, playing the victim, yeah, a lot of Chicanos need to stop playing the victim and do something about the situation. And it's not just complaining, but taking action too. And also working on, yourself, your family, and your community. And I kind of see it. You got some ethnic people out here, they're not just selfish. Like when they become successful, they go and reach out to their own people and start building for them as well, and start connecting them, start hooking them up, Um, but definitely, anyways, so let's see here. So there's another, some more comments. Let's see here. Here's another statement. Being the labor forces does not mean you participate in policy or politics. Hmm. Well, that's it all depends on, yeah. I'm studying a lot of political philosophy as well, man. Being a labor force, sometimes you do participate. Actually, you do participate in politics. Some people say politics is everything. Everything is politics, right? Um, I think what you mean by policy making, yeah, you're right. Um, Out here, especially in the United States or even in Mexico, it's like, you got like a kind of like a political ruling class making all the decisions and everything. For example, out here in California, we have I know I sometimes I get frustrated like you got the majority of people who vote for a certain thing, but then you have like a structure, a political structure where there's a few people like in these councils or in charge of legislation or these people at the top, they're the ones that ultimately make all the decisions, and they claim that they're representing the people, but they're not. They're representing certain interests, all about the money, right? Certain interests, certain corruptions, and the people want something else, but this elite right here is like doing other things that the people don't want. And so um but that's that you are making you are correct actually to some extent, but then there's people who are in the labor force who are involved in politics at times. um and so it all depends on what you mean. um let's see. Let's see. Okay, so this guy, I don't know who this guy is, but he's actually read on some books here. But he's saying false batalla compares Mexico with the baseless failed malinchismo. Mm, with the baseless failed malinchismo. Okay. Um, I don't agree with that. Yeah, so malinchismo, I think you're saying something about the sellouts, right? Um, and no, his imaginary Mexico he refers to it is the colonization. It's the Spaniards. It's this parasitic culture ever since colonization. Go back and reread that book, as you told me to go back and reread Jack D. Forbes' book. I read that so many times. But go back and read that book, and he does talk about the colonial culture and the problems of that. And he basically says that the majority of the culture in Mexico is indigenous. That's the motherland, and then you got the few at the top, right? This superficial culture out here of the Spaniards, the colonization, the parasitic capitalist culture that's always living off the indigenous culture. It's always in control of it. It's always manipulating it. It's always trying to dominate it and destroy it, and enslave it. And it all has to do with colonization. And that's he does mention that. He does mention that there. And go reread that book. You know, go read it slowly as well. Anyway. Um, And so let's see here. Actually, he's making some good comments, and it's a good way to have some good dialogue here. Um, okay, let's see here. He says Chicanos in the Southwest are the majority now, but they don't participate in politics or civic life. Yeah, it all depends. Like I said again, it's more complex than some absolute statement, right? I do see a lot of Chicanos involved in politics. Like for example, I'm in this Los Angeles, right? You do see some Chicanos, in the council, even small cities within Los Angeles. You do see um, a lot of Chicanos involved in politics. But the problem is they end up selling out at times. And we call them politicos, right? And they sell out. They're bought off. They're brainwashed by certain politics at times. Um, and a lot of times the critique is they don't do much for the Chicano community. So, but you're talking about the majority of Chicanos in the Southwest. They don't participate in politics or civic life. I would say, yeah, you are right about that. The um, majority don't participate. They're just, you know, they're just with this survival mindset. That's what it is, and that's the problem there. That's the problem. But there are more Chicanos starting to get involved in politics. Um, and me, I'm involved in politics very much. I'm involved all throughout social media, talking about politics. I've been in campaigns, in political campaigns. I'm actually involved in the RFK Jr. You know, campaign at this moment. Um, I don't really like the Democrats, but I like the fact that what RFK Jr. is doing is challenging the status quo of the Democrats, and they're trying to censor him, and they're trying to rig it, for Biden, right? and and I know, yeah, I know the whole political system doesn't truly represent Chicanos, and it's, but I, I see certain candidates that are not everyone's 100% in agreement with you, right? But at least you could, if you find certain issues that you actually are attracted to, you're actually gonna support those kind of politicians, right? And so there's politics that I agree with RFK Jr., especially, the whole jab issue. I can't say certain words here on YouTube and everything, but you know what I'm talking about. He's very critical of the jabs, and talks about, questions the safety and efficacy of those jabs. He has the whole thing on the Children's Health Defense Fund. They're pretty good. I've been following them for quite a while. I'm highly involved in the health and freedom movement ever since they started doing this lockdowns and this mandate nonsense and everything. And that's not the only issue. I like his issue on, the environment. Although I'm critical of the whole climate change solutions, but there is an issue of environmental destruction and toxicities that we need to address. Um, and those are like some of the major issues that I'm very attracted to. And if you look at all these other politicians running, they're not really good at those issues. and and to me, the way I see it is, yeah, in a sense, I'm kind of I subscribe more to Chicano anarchism, but there's a time where, hey, if I see a politician that's pretty good on certain issues, then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna support that politician, But I'm very critical of the state, and whether and I am even still critical of RFK Jr. at times too, because I heard he's into Zionism, and he's into and then his whole issue on the border. I see what he does, make some good points on the whole border issue, that there is corruption there, and it's coming from the Biden administration, as well as some of the Mexican corruption that's going on with the trafficking and stuff. But I do think that RFK Jr. should not only, he kind of blames the cartels for everything, but it's also the Mexican government that's involved, and so he needs to address that. But compare him to other politicians running right now, he's very more intelligent than all these other politicians out here. I mean, I looked into Dr. Cornel West, and Jimmy Dore actually exposed them. And Cornel West, I was a big fan of his and this and that, but he's pushing a lot of the liberal, you know, LGBTQ issues, and the whole over exaggerating. Like he sounds just like a Democrat, and he just wants to see Trump as the fascist, but doesn't want to call out Biden and his fascism and his corruption. So, I'm very, critical of, people that just repeat the mainstream narrative out here. And I don't think RFK Jr. He actually challenges a lot of the mainstream out here better than all these other presidential candidates. But at the end, I will say that we need more Chicanos out here. And but the problem is the system is so built that even if we have a Chicano, say a Chicano president or something. Hold on, let me see. This got unplugged here. Let me start this cam again. Even if we had a Chicano president or a Native American president, that's still not going to solve all the issues of colonialism that exist. It's almost as though people think Barack Obama, the first black president, was going to solve everything, right, for black people. And a lot of black people are say, no, Barack Obama didn't really do much for the black community. So, so, so even me, if you have a Chicano or Native American president, like we still have to be critical. Say, okay, is he still supporting the system? Is he actually doing a lot for our community, or is he just a puppet? So yeah, politics is very complex out here. But politics is everything. Get involved, man. Start speaking out on these issues. Get involved. Take action. Start grassroots community organization. Get involved. Start going on your social media. Whatever gifts and talents you have, start promoting um, Chicano issues. Chicano interests, and be more vocal because we don't have really much representation out there. All we hear is usually black and white. People always giving their views about everything. That's why I'm on here. I'm on here to make videos out here to give you, a brown perspective. I'm not saying I'm the absolute brown perspective, but I will say I am a perspective. So, anyways, let's get on to another comment. Um, okay, so this guy is a little disrespectful now. He's trying to say, okay, let me address this. He goes, "You only promote division with your woke labeling." Oh man, you sound like a Republican, dude. Um, so, um, okay, you have to be aware that I'm against this liberal wokeism as well. Wokeismo, right? And I don't like how there has always been a conscious community, right? And I always been involved in that. A lot of us who are really truly conscious don't even like any of these parties, right? Both Republicans and Democrats. We all see both of them as being the double-headed dragon, right? There's always puppets and everything, but the whole woke term, it's just I would apply that to people who just went along with the whole mainstream and started promoting the lockdowns, the jabs, and started promoting the whole Biden agenda. And what happened is they misappropriated a lot of things. They start using racism as a cover up for their their corruption, right? Like for example, yeah, Black Lives Matters, right? And there's black people who are even critical of Black Lives Matters. They say, okay, we believe in that racism exists, but this Black Lives Matter just use the racist rhetoric to benefit themselves and to go and buy some mansion and to hoard all the wealth that they accumulated. and go give it to the LGBTQ community when they didn't do hardly anything for the black community. And so um, people use the whole racist stuff, racism, and it gets out of hand. The way I am is call out racism for what it is. Don't over exaggerate it, and don't underreport it as well. But there is systemic racism that does exist, and we have to address that. There's a whole historical legacy. There's a caste system that exists, so we have to address that. So I'm not into that whole woke label. I'm into being conscious, and being conscious, you're critical of the false, fake woke movement as well. Anyways, so let's see here. Adam Smith made the case for restricted capitalism. Yep, that's right. I just mentioned that. Exactly. 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 That's what I'm kind of more open to that. Um, and I do see there's a problem with capitalism, but then in reality, you're never going to destroy capitalism. Um, it seems like a reality that's going to be here for a long time. So we got to work with the system in a sense, and but promote more economic justice in some sense. Um, let's see. So he mentioned Marx wasn't the first point out. Was it the first to point out? I guess to point out class conflict, and Marx himself was part of the bourgeoisie. uh, Oh, good point. Good point. I'm very critical of Marx as well, Marxism. Yes, class conflict was, I mean, it's been mentioned throughout history at times. That's why people went, that's why there was all kinds of revolutions occurring. And there's people, usually the serfs or the working class or the slaves, always revolting against the oppressors who hoarded all the wealth and resources, right? And they definitely called out the the class conflict, the bourgeoisie, and all that. So I agree with you on that. And let's see here. Marx himself was bourgeoisie. Well, actually, what I understand is that he actually was having he was supported by his rich friends. That's why he wrote his manifesto because he had support financially. But they say supposedly he was broke, right? But then he got funding by his rich friends. So instead of working all day and then he couldn't work all day and then write his manifesto, right? You had to do that full time, right? So he needed funding for that. So his rich friends gave him a lot of support money so he can write that uh, communist manifesto. So yeah, you could say. I mean, it all depends. Like he was broke, but then he was like a broke philosopher, right? But then he was funded by rich people, so you could say he was part of that bourgeoisie class. Um, let's see here. Good comments, man. Good comments. I actually like this kind of stuff. As long as you keep it respectful and civil, I'm cool with that. Anyways, he goes, there are no Chicanos in politics, just Hispanics. Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. Well, I don't know about that, man. I know there's some politicians that identify as Chicano or Chicana, and I know some of them are were in the LA City Council and stuff like that. So, but then some controversies happen where they're no longer there now. But But yeah, a lot of them politicians do identify as Hispanic or Latino, and you are right about that. To be a true Chicano and Chicana, you're you're not gonna be bowing down to all this political corruption. That's the nature of politics. It's like, in order to get voted in, you have to have backing and support, and usually the backing and support is like financial interest, certain companies, certain corporations, right? Um, and so the only way for you to usually win is is through corruption, and that's like through financial means, certain interests, and all that. They basically, you get bought out, right? In order to hold a position in politics, that's why they call them political puppets, right? And yeah, that's the nature of politics out here in the United States, and it's that's. But you could be political without being completely absorbed into the corrupt political system. You could still talk about politics even without voting, or say you vote sometimes, right? Um, you could still be political. You could even be promoting grassroots politics, Chicano politics, right? Like me, I promote Chicano politics, but you're not going to see a brown politician out there in the city council talking about these kind of issues, right? They're just going to talk about issues that are, shaped and formed according to the status quo and the agendas, right? Um, yeah, you made a comment here. RFK Jr. is a vowed Zionist. Yeah, you're right, man. You're right. But who isn't, right? All these politicians are Zionists, right? So if you match up all the other politicians out here, you know, and you compare all the different issues, say, okay, all of them are equal Zionists, right? In order for you to become president, you have to be a Zionist, right? And I'm very critical of Zionism. I'm not in support of Zionism, um, and but I'm not anti-Semitic, and I know there's Jewish people who are against Zionism as well, and very critical of the Zionist state of Israel, especially what they do. The Zionist state does to the Palestinians and the surrounding Arabs. Very they put them in basically reservations like the Europeans did with the Native Americans out here. And they oppress the Palestinians. So I'm very critical of the Zionists, but on other issues, um, RFK Jr. is pretty good. He surpasses all the rest of these politicians. He's better than Trump, that's for sure. I just saw Trump on the issues, and he's still promoting the jabs, and he's anti-environment, and he's all about corporate interests. You know, he's people think that he's they a lot of his followers are they're critical of the LGBTQ movement, but Trump is one of the he's like they say he's the most supportive of the whole LGBT community. So he was actually put on the line. Do you think that someone can transition, like, I think a man, I'm trying to recall, but I saw an interview recently, can a man transition to be a woman successfully, and he is kind of like double-minded. He didn't really want to take a position, so he does have that double-mindedness. He plays politician at times, so a lot of Trump supporters are not critical of Trump. They follow him blindly, and some of the Trump supporters are anti-jab, right? But then Trump he's pro-jab, so that's a problem right there. So So RFK Jr. is just a better presidential candidate than the rest of these other politicians out here, and he's definitely way better than Biden. Biden is, he's a warmonger. He's already getting us close to World War III with this whole Ukraine versus Russia conflict. He's mandated the jabs, um, and he's failed on a lot of policies out here, and he's never been about the working class, and he's always he's a corporatist himself as well. So um, but definitely RFK Jr. He's really good. I went to a recent meeting of his, and he was talking about how what's causing a lot of homelessness and poverty out here, and he says that people think is most of the homeless people are homeless because of drugs or dysfunctions and all that, but he found out that what happened is a rise in the cost of houses, and rent and houses, um, and because of that, people can't make that a lot of money to even sustain themselves in living in certain houses or housing, and a lot of times they end up becoming homeless, and he exposes the whole BlackRock and Vanguard and a lot of these corporations that are buying up tons of land. And it seems like this is what they're trying to do, is they're trying to make it hard. This is what the Great Reset is all about, where you own nothing and you'll be happy, right? And basically, what they want to do is they um, they want to make houses unaffordable for the common folk out here. And what's going on is they can't afford it. And what happens, even if they do have money, sometimes to, they get outbid by some corporation like BlackRock or Vanguard, who has more money, and they end up buying the house over the common folk out here. So BlackRock, Vanguard, and it's another company, I forgot the name. He mentioned three of them, but they're buying up a lot of land and houses out here, and a lot of they want to be in control of the housing and even the agriculture out here, and this is all setting up for the Great Reset, where common folks can't even afford anything, so you have to basically own nothing and you'll be happy. And they established their Great Reset, where they have full control of the resources and wealth out here, and you have to comply to everything they they dictate. So, anyways, but overall, RFK Jr. is pretty good. I like how he's challenging the Democratic, establishment, and I'm voting for him, and and even if they try to rig it towards him, I'm just making a political statement. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna vote for RFK Jr. anyways. I like a lot of his positions out there. He's better than these other presidents out here, presidential candidates, including Biden. Anyways, so let's see here. He may mention something here. Very interesting, good statement right there. At the rate it's going, capitalism will destroy itself. It will implode. um, it might, man. I totally agree with you on this perspective. Um, it seems like, um, like a lot of times, a lot of systems, a lot of empires, a lot of governments, they don't last forever, right? And so what happens is there's always change, always constant change in reality. And the way capitalism is at the rate, at the rate it's going, it's leading to the destruction of the world, the environment, humans, all kinds of things, and it just feeds off of, it's parasitic. it feeds off of resources faster than any other system, and and can we sustain ourselves with this kind of system? Um, we're seeing the after effects, the negative effects of capitalism. And you're right. It seems like it will self destruct on its own, and that's why I say that. I guess us brown folks, conscious Chicanos, and all that, we need to, if I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon with when capitalism will implode on itself, but you gotta prepare yourself and start working on alternative systems. Alternative systems where a lot of times it's a lot of indigenous type systems. Where you grow your own food, you have control over your own resources, your own land. Um, you learn how to have commerce with others. Like the trade, the barter system. um, Going back to those systems where we survived for civilizations. Capitalism is a recent system, and civilizations have not. We the civilizations of the past have thrived off of other type of systems. And I think a lot of those previous systems, were more sustainable. And so, yeah, you're right about that. Capitalism seems like it will destroy itself and implode. Anyways, um, but yeah, actually, good conversation here. Good statements, you know. Anyways, well, I guess I'm gonna end it here, but let me conclude this that actually Mexican independence was not independence for indigenous people, mixed blood or full blood. It was all about the Spaniards living in Mexico and their whole caste system, and they have full control of the resources to this very day, the land and resources. That's why indigenous resistance continues to this very day. Anti-colonialism, us Chicanos too. We struggle through this. We've been colonized by not only the Spaniards but by the Anglos as well. And the Anglos have set up their caste system in the United States as well, and they hoard all the resources and wealth. The Anglo Europeans and most of the working class, the poor, are usually brown folks, indigenous. Um, and so there's a similar system out here as well as in Mexico. Um, so we have to, work on ourselves, self construction and build for our communities and help each other and work on success and take actions to resist. Learn your indigenous history, culture, identity, learn your indigenous languages and all that, and promote and resist and work on your success and all that. But um, so, and then in terms of Hispanic heritage, we're not Hispanic, we're not Latino, we're not hit from Hispania. Speaking Spanish does not, mean that you're no longer indigenous. Speaking English does not mean you're no longer indigenous. And what else? I guess that's it. I guess I'll end it there. Good discussion on politics. I didn't know it was going to go that way, but sometimes I get some good comments and I'll address them. And yeah, so definitely. And also, don't forget to, if you have questions or you want resources and all that, check out my other social media sites. I have a Rumble account where I upload a lot of good info there, a lot of good videos. Go look me up. Actually, it's below in the links, my Rumble account. Also, if you want to send me a message, go link up to my Instagram account. And also, I'm on Twitter. I tweet, and retweet a lot of good stuff. Um, so, yeah, definitely. Well, I'm gonna let you guys go. Um, and this is the Conscious Chicano. Um, don't be woke. Be conscious. All right. See you guys later. Later. Have a good day.